I'm Joshua, and I'm an INTP. And first and foremost, I would like to say thank you for viewing this video and subsequently visiting my channel. The topic of this video will be a revisit on a previous topic that I've discussed before, which is a part of the On Creativity series that I did months ago. I've had dialogues with people several times outside of the internet and at my college and with friends and individuals, and they've had several questions on my on being childlike video. And so what I take from their questions is there wasn't enough lucidity in the explanation of that video in terms of the practical scope of increasing one's creative capacities, and then necessarily what I meant by being childlike, which I thought I explicated, but I suppose I should go into further detail about the salience to this trait and this factor and the overall multifarious aspects of creativity. So, creativity is a phenomenon more so rather than a trait. It's emergent, which means it's something that's a result of the propagation of multiple factors that create a singularity in one orientation or another. So it's emergent. It's something that comes together by a multitude of things. And so in the psychological literature, when researchers, primarily psychologists, do case studies of highly creative individuals, they typically cite this trait of being childlike within the creative individual. They oftentimes, this expression denotes aspects of awe and excitivity of the numinous aspects of reality. But really, while I read this literature, what I started to realize is what they mean practically can be broken down into two aspects. And the explanations I gave for these two aspects I thought were fairly straightforward, but without further digression, I'll just say that the necessity for the term even being childlike is to make a differentiation of a unique aspect of different perceptions. So it's the perceptive quality of the individual that researchers are trying to introduce with the term of being childlike. It may seem like something that's rather obvious, but I think further explication of this will make it clear why the trait of being childlike has any salience and or should be given a further and deeper look into creativity and psychological research, because very really creative individuals have the capacity to extend perspectives. It's the ability to shift one's perspective that the quality of childlike has to say about the whole phenomenon of a creative individual. Because in the first place, the reason that they are able to look at the world different than most individuals and then denote items of salience to things that most people think are meaningless is because there's something about their perception in the first place that is different or not neurotypical. So, firstly, the thing I covered was the tendency of rebelliousness or rebellion. But I will say that the trait of rebellion is more of an emergent property, and it has to do with the capacity for shifting or just a differentiation in perspective. And that's why I cited in the first video low latent inhibition, because psychopathology and personality disorders have had a large association with high levels of creativity. The reason for this is because items of divergent thinking, items of associative thinking, imagination have a great interplay or just a strong instigation in the factors of novelty or novel perception. So individuals who tend to be schizotypal, individuals who tend to have low latent inhibition, also why you find in autistic individuals high levels of imaginative qualities despite most common belief is because they're not neurotypical in their perspectives. So in their time of perspective seeking or their time of just viewing the world, they're seeing things that are qualitatively different than most people. For one reason or another, low latent inhibition means that they don't have the factor of inhibition saliency, meaning that most people, when they walk into a room and they see an item, after a number of times and encounters with that item, it gravitates more to have less and less saliency in terms of its novelty. You basically shorthand the object and make it an abstraction in your mind, and it doesn't have any way to stand out to you as something different than whatever schema you've made of it. And it usually takes individuals of jarring events or serendipity or chance circumstance to see something in a new light. But individuals with low latent inhibition typically have experience the phenomena of vujade rather than deja vu. Vujade is seeing something that you've seen before in a new way, and they do that quite often, and they have strange levels of association. And it's the marker of this perspective that often creates, or just the shifting of perspectives, it often creates something of a rebelliousness or a disappointment or a resolution to not accept reality or whatever it is that they're handed or shown for what it is. Creative people and children, and I say this is a part of being childlike because if children, for example, you put something in front of them to eat and they don't find it particularly appealing, they're going to let you know that they don't find it particularly appealing. They're not going to swallow their distaste. They're not going to swallow their distaste for sociality. They're not going to swallow their taste, at least about from the ages of 0 to 6. They're not going to swallow their taste for sociality, for agreeableness, or whatever. Obviously, there's differences in temperaments even in children. But for the most part, children are fairly disagreeable. Even agreeable children, they're fairly disagreeable. And creative people have the same tendency to disagreeableness. But it's a disagreeableness in terms of perspectives, because they see something that's wrong and they don't let other forces and factors outside of them spell away this wrongness, and they're willing to be staunch in their disappointment with things and to be resolute about trying to see the world for what it is rather than trying to just familiarize and accept. It is the tendency to be discontent and novelty seeking that I think are the factors of rebellion that is instantiated within the trait of being childlike. Then I say hopefulness is another thing, because children are fundamentally naive and they're rather ignorant about things, but that's something that has a salience and connectivity to highly creative people. Because when you're in the vanguard or at the very frontier of something, you're in the depths of the unknown. You don't really know what it is you're scaling, and don't let an artist fool you into thinking that they know exactly what they're doing. That they knew exactly what they were doing when they were creating a work. For example, a lot of writers cite that they don't know the end whenever they write, or they don't know really what they're writing. And that's because novelty, obviously if something's new, you don't have any familiarity with it. So how to approach it and how to go about it, how to understand it in the first place, does not put you in a place of security. It does not put you in a place of mastery or the capacity to be lazy or lethargic in one's thought, efforts, and persistence. Because if you really want to get a grasp on that thing and best it, essentially, you have to be fairly diligent and work hard to turn disorder and chaos into something that has order and form. And so I cite this to children very really because in research about children, when dealing with unsolvable puzzles. I say problems, but it's better to say puzzles. Researchers would give them puzzles, and they would sit there and fester with them. And unless the researcher told the child, they would have to stop the child after about 30 minutes. And if the child stopped before 30 minutes, they stopped merely because they had an emotional breakdown. So it's not ever because they don't think that they can solve it. It's more or less when the researchers are looking at it, it's that they get frustrated with solving it, or they don't know. Their lack of knowing that something can't be done propels them to insist on its doing anyway. And that's something that's very similar to a creative person, because for the mere fact that when you are standing on the frontier of the domain of in a domain of knowledge, you don't know what's out there, and you don't know how long you must and need to persist. So you have to have some sort of hopefulness, naivete, ignorance, something to propel you forward, and a very deep level of persistence. But I don't think that's a part of being childlike, because children can be lazy. But I think that with that in perspective, it's quite easy to me to see how one can increase their propensity to creative insights. Try and change your perspectives, and there's a number of ways of doing this. Traveling is a very easy way. Going to new places is a very easy way. Talking to people, reading things that you don't agree with, talking to people that you don't agree with, reading things that are new that you just have some slice of curiosity for. Those are all ways to change your perspective, because a lot of what perspective is a shifting of factors of belief. And there's a lot of research to show that our beliefs and the information that we consume is going to say a lot about how we dissect and construct, and our brains dissect and construct up the world. Then I would say also that if you know something has a problem, try and fix it. So there is a number of problems within your home, within your neighborhood, within your community, within so many spheres of relevance and influence to you as an individual. Tackle them one at a time, and I promise you, you'll find yourself being far more creative than you ever thought you would be. And I would say too, try and always stand on the frontier. It takes a long time to get out somewhere from where other people are, but just keep walking until you get there. And when you're there, just maintain hopefulness and persist. Just be insistent on staying in that uncomfortable space, and you will find yourself appreciating the numinous and the awe-inspiring qualities of reality, and increasing your propensity to have creative breakthroughs. Because creativity is an emergent phenomenon. It's not really necessarily a trait completely. It's a host of characteristics from what I understand. So that's a revisit on being childlike, and I wanted to do that just to get back into the swing of making videos. And I'm sorry for the hiatus and the delay. I tried to make the on ENFP video today, but I found that was just far too much of a labor, and I didn't like the original video, so I deleted it. But you can expect on ENFPs sometime probably this weekend. So that's my video, and thank you for watching.